Good afternoon. I'm John Worthington. My ancestry can be traced all the way back to the 13th century in County Lancashire, England, where the manor of Worthington Hall had stood for over 700 years. The origin of the family name is from the Saxon Worthington, meaning farm and town. My grandfather, Nicholas Worthington, sided with the Royalists during the Cromwellian Wars. Not only was he severely wounded, but being on the losing side, he suffered the confiscation of his considerable landholdings in Liverpool. And so in 1656, he emigrated to the colonies. He first settled in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, then in Hartford, and finally settled in Massachusetts in the Hatfield section of Hadley. He became a constable and served as a selectman. The town records show that he was freed from military exercises by reason of his lameness. My father, Lieutenant John Worthington, purchased 3 tracts of land in Springfield from the widow of Elijah Holyoke. The second and third of these lie east of Maine by Bridge Street, and the first bordered on William Pynchon's property. This became the Worthington homestead. My father was an innkeeper and later a shopkeeper. He served as a selectman and town moderator and was tasked with securing a minister for the First Congregational Church. I was born November 24th, 1719. Under my father's tutelage, I performed well academically and was admitted to Yale in 1736. After I graduated in 1740, I remained at Yale to study religion. I preached at local churches and I served as a tutor. I had strong religious beliefs. I was a strict Congregationalist, a religion with roots in Puritanism, and gained a reputation of leaning too severely in that direction. I was a strict Sabbatarian and held that the Sabbath was to be strictly adhered to. No labor whatsoever was to be performed on the Sabbath, to the extent that in the Worthington household, not even the beds were to be made until after sunset. Encouraged by my father, I began to study law in Suffield, Connecticut under Phineas Lyman. Not only did Phineas Lyman go on to become a prominent lawyer and legislator in Connecticut, but in 1755 he was made a major general in the Connecticut militia. During the French and Indian War, he took command at the Battle of Lake George after General Sir William Johnson was wounded. He also was second in command at the victorious battles of Ticonderoga, Crown Point, and in the later war, Havana. I passed the bar in 1744. Unfortunately, my father had passed away a few months earlier and never lived to see me fulfill the dream he had for me of becoming a lawyer. My father's will bequeathed that his estate be divided equally with my brother Samuel. In 1750, I purchased my brother's share, and from then on I began to buy and sell other properties, a practice I continued for years to come. Over the years, over 250 deeds passed through my hands, and I became quite wealthy. On August 2nd, 1762, at an auction in Boston, 10 future towns in western Massachusetts were sold by the colonial government on behalf of the king. Such sales were common when the crown needed cash. I was part of a 5-member syndicate that purchased lot number 3, consisting of 24,000 acres at a price of £1,860 sterling. The sales agreement stipulated that land was to be set aside for church and ministry, a school, and a grist mill. Along with Sailor Bernard, we became sole proprietors. Our venture was quite successful. The tracts were quickly sold and occupied, and within 6 years the town was incorporated. In adhering to the sales agreement, I followed through and oversaw the construction of the church and grist mill and set aside land for the school and ministry at my own expense. In gratitude, the town fathers named their newly incorporated town Worthington in my honor. My law practice was also successful, and I soon rose to become the leader of the Hampshire County Bar. My reputation grew, and I came to be called to preside at other courthouses in both Worcester and Berkshire counties. When Colonel Ephraim Williams was killed at the Battle of Lake George, I was named one of the executors of his will, which I followed through to the letter for years to come. I paid off the numerous small bequests of money. I distributed his many books and other personal items and nurtured the lands, bonds, and notes, reinvesting funds as needed for the next 30 years. By then, the estate had grown enough that I could now petition the General Court to enact legislation which would establish the free school outlined in the will. This school went on to become Williams College. My expertise even took me outside of the colony. The town of Berlin, Connecticut was founded in 1686. It built its first meeting house, which also served as a church, in 1716. By 1771, the congregation had by far outgrown this meeting house with its 4 pews and 6 benches. But the townspeople could not agree on the site for the new building. The town meetings became quite heated, and it was decided to submit the matter to arbitration. Given my expertise in both religious and legal matters, I was called on to study and mediate the dilemma. My solution was quite simple. I felt like King Solomon. I suggested that the congregation be split in 2 and sites for 2 meeting houses be constructed, east and west. The oak and chestnut timbers and other construction materials from the old meeting house were divided equally between the 2 new buildings. The West congregation adopted the name Kensington, and the East congregation adopted the name Worthington. Here in Springfield, I served as a justice of the peace, a selectman, a town moderator, and a town sheriff, and a high sheriff. Of this latter position, it has been said of me that I ruled Springfield with an iron fist. 1654, the local militia was divided into 2 regiments, north and south. I was chosen to lead the South Regiment. I have been referred to as Colonel Worthington ever since. My political ambitions grew. And in 1747, I decided to run for state representative and was re-elected continuously through 1774, except for 3 years beginning in 1767 when I was elected to the Governor's Council. As you can imagine, I spent a lot of my time in the eastern part of the state where I came to develop strong relationships with my eastern colleagues. Some of the more prominent notables you may have heard of are John Hancock, John and Samuel Adams, and Thomas Hutchinson. My eastern colleagues looked askance at the western part of the state, and I consider it a feather in my cap that I, a staunch citizen of Western Mass, should have been esteemed so highly by my eastern colleagues. Their attitude is reflected in the following letter. It was written to me by Thomas Hutchinson when he was Lieutenant Governor. February 28, 1769. Dear Sir, in conversation with the governor a few days ago about the Attorney General's place, which will be vacant in a short time, it was agreed that I should write to you and propose to you to accept of it, provided a salary of no less than 200 pounds sterling a year. I could not give any great encouragement to the governor because it is necessary that an Attorney General should live at or near Boston. And I know of your attachment to that foggy, unhealthy air from the Connecticut River, which if you do not remove will shorten your days. But as it is possible, I thought it best to make the proposal. Well, he was right. Quite content here in the noxious fog of Springfield, and I declined the position. Surely such attitudes have changed after 250 years. No? Of my eastern colleagues, politically I was most closely aligned with Thomas Hutchinson. We were both conservative in outlook. We revered the rule of law, God, king, country, and parliament. We were disparaged as loyalists and Tories. Hutchinson was governor when the 3 ships with a cargo of tea began to dock in Boston Harbor late November 1773. The more radical colonists refused to unload the tea in protest of the taxes imposed by the Tea Act. The armed protesters demanded that the ships be returned to England unloaded, as had been done in Philadelphia. Hutchinson had opposed the Tea Act, but considered it his duty as crown-appointed governor to uphold the crown's revenue laws, and he refused to allow the ships to leave the docks unloaded. The standoff ended 20 days later when the deadline for the collection of the import duties arrived. That night, the protesters boarded the ships and tossed the tea into the harbor. In retaliation, the Crown shut down Boston Harbor, and Parliament enacted a series of laws that came to be known as the Intolerable Acts. Hutchinson's steadfast adherence to the rule of law and crown was viewed by many of the colonists as treacherous, and he paid because of it. Back in 1765, his stately manor was ransacked and destroyed by an angry mob because he had refused to publicly denounce the Stamp Act. My own steadfast adherence to the rule of law and crown led to a similar day of reckoning for me. Some of the Intolerable Acts singled out Boston and Massachusetts for punishment. One of these, the Massachusetts government law, replaced elected officials with crown-appointed loyalists. This infuriated the populace, and the anger spread throughout the colony and did not bypass Springfield. On the hot sunny afternoon of August 30th, 1774, the bells in West Springfield rang out, signaling a crowd of 3,000 gathered in Springfield to begin marching down Main Street to the courthouse. Some were armed with clubs and staves. They demanded that the courthouse be shut down for the rest of the day. Then all of the court officers and elected officials were marched one by one to the center of a circle where they were forced to renounce in the most explicit terms that they would not enforce any of the newly enacted laws nor serve in any position created by the law. When my turn came, there rose a most thunderous roar from the crowd. And as one eyewitness recounted in a letter to his brother, at the sight of Colonel Worthington, their eyes flashed lightning. I had never witnessed such hatred and venom, and it was all directed at me. I had been appointed to the Mendem's Council, which by the Massachusetts Government Act replaced the elected members of the Governor's Council. This made me particularly odious in the eyes of my fellow townsmen. Witnessing the depth of their emotion at my mere presence made me reconsider my position. Humbled as directed, I knelt down before them and signed their document forswearing my appointment. Many of my fellow Tories, including my daughter and son-in-law, moved to Canada, but my love of Springfield kept me here. I donated money to arm our revolutionary soldiers. I served as a town moderator. I was part of the committee that welcomed George Washington when he passed through Springfield. In 1791, I helped dissolve the border dispute between Massachusetts and Connecticut. In 1798, I chartered the Lock and Canal Company and the Springfield Aqueduct. Shortly thereafter, my health began to deteriorate, not just physically, but even more so mentally, and I slipped into my second childhood. I died 2 years later, April 25th, 1800, at the age of 80. Oh, by the way, in case you were wondering, I outlived Thomas Hutchinson by 12 years. The poor man died in exile in England at the age of 68. Thank you.